All right.
Well, Jeroen, thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jeroen, 42 years old, almost 43 actually. I live here in Antwerp, Belgium. I don't work in the space industry, never have. But since I was, I don't know, I guess about 8 years old, I've always been fascinated with space. And one of my first space memories was, might sound a bit morbid, but the Challenger disasters. One of the things I was, how old was I? 6 or 7, I guess. I remember that from the news, and it really, I don't know, kind of impressed me. It was a big thing happening, and I don't know. I think that's how I got in contact with space and space exploration in the first place. And my second memory is me dragging my parents to the local planetarium. It was a lunar eclipse. I remember very well. I dragged them to the planetarium because I wanted to, I thought I could see it better from there, which is obviously not. We all know that now. But you had all these big, these big boards with all that data, distance from the moon to the Earth and so on. And pre-internet times, I took my paper and my pencil and I wrote everything down, and that's how yeah, those are my first memories actually. And since then, I've always been fascinated by space and by space exploration. Yeah.
Now, the Challenger incident, it was the first time to actually send a non-professional astronaut to space. Well,
Yeah.
not really. I mean, I guess we had sent the current NASA administrator, who was a senator at the time, in the shuttle right before that. Um,
Yeah.
but it was the first time sending a teacher in space, and it was
Yeah.
during the school day here in the U.S. And a lot of classrooms, had all their kids gathered around
hmm
the TV, and we're all excited, teacher in space, counting down 3, 2, 1, and the
Yeah.
shuttle takes off, and everybody's like, oh, and then disaster happens. And I think that really, people had like that raw exposure to that moment. It would have happened later in the day for you there in Europe, I suppose. But and also it was an American teacher, so
hmm
maybe there wasn't quite as much enthusiasm, in other parts of the
Yeah, no,
world.
no. I don't think I've seen it live. I don't remember that. I think I just saw it on the news in the evening, probably, because I was watching news with my parents. But I don't know, it is actually one of my first vivid memories altogether, to be honest. I was about 5, 6 years old. That's the age when you really start, I think, looking around a bit outside of your own home, I guess, and following the news and getting some, yeah, I don't know. It was very visual to me, actually. I just remember seeing that on TV, that phone. And actually watched it about a year ago with my daughter. She's 11 now. And I always, of course, I drag her into space as well. She has to be interested in space. That's that's a prerequisite, I guess. I showed it to her as well, and watching back at those images and the parents of the teacher who were excited and then realized, oh, something happened. It's kind of a very of space exploration, and we had it again with Columbia afterwards. I was at uni back then,
Hmm.
um, which was maybe less shocking in some way, but still, yeah, I don't know. It puts a very human side to all that sciencey, spacey stories that we usually get. People walking on the moon and rockets landing and everything, but in the end, there's people on board sometimes risking their lives. Um, just look at Apollo 1. What happened there. How 3 people lost their lives dedicating their lives to space exploration and thereby giving their lives. And I think that's something that we have to realize when we return to the moon, hopefully in a few years, that there's going to be people on board, and it's not risk free. I think that's a very important thing to remember.
And I guess you say it was like one of your most vivid memories. And I mean, I guess let me ask this question a different way. So
hmm
Inspiration 4 mission, where four civilian,
Mhm.
non-professional astronauts went up in SpaceX capsule. If you had been selected for that trip, would your memory of the Challenger incident make it harder for you to go?
I don't think so. I mean, I drive my car almost every day, right? And when I drive to work, last 2 years it was working from home mostly, but every day when I drive to work, I pass at what's it's about 60 kilometers of highway. Multiple people died on that highway since it was constructed. And you can be paralyzed by that. If I can take a train, people die on a train as well from time to time. Trains crash, and it's just a thing. Progress doesn't come without a price, and I would certainly hope if I would have been on that mission that it would have gone right. But I don't think that would have stopped me. I'm not sure if I would be medically fit for it. That's probably a different question. But no, it wouldn't have stopped me. No, definitely not. No,
And
no.
you mentioned you have an 11-year-old daughter who you
Mhm.
drag to space events and into space.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I have two children. One's 23 and one's 19, and I
Oh,
find
okay.
sometimes their enthusiasm for my interest is almost inversely proportional to my own interest. It's like they need to offset it somehow. I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if you're experiencing that yourself, or you
I'm
know.
starting to, yeah. When they're, you probably remember that as well. When they're like 6 or 7, everything that daddy finds cool, they find cool as well. Then at 8 and 9, still, and I start seeing that it's yeah. She's more into drawing now and then getting into art. And I don't know. I was watching something. What was it? There was a live stream of. I had James Webb to launch, right?
Hmm.
I was like, oh, come on, come here, have a look. James Webb's like, yeah, daddy. So it's starting to wane a little bit. You can't force it. And some, like you say, sometimes I try to rebalance whatever you do and balance with what they do. But, I did my best, Nathan. That's all I can do. Like, she has to find her own way in the end.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I think it's an important thing for all parents to keep in mind is that they are actually separate human beings than we are.
Yeah, yeah. And I try to, what I've always tried with my daughter is, I'm a divorced father. So the time that my daughter's with me, it's only half of the time. I try to spend it wisely. And the thing that I always try to do was I'm going to show her as much of the world as I can, and then she will make decisions about, what is she interested in, what does she care about. And we've done a lot of museums. We went to the Euro Space Center. We went to the ESA Center in Noordwijk in the Netherlands at the open day. We've done all of that, and in the end, it's just like you and me. She has to find her own way in life, and I'm 42 and I'm still looking for that way actually. So I'm not worried yet. She's only 11. I'm not worried. She'll find it. And my partner that I met now a few years ago, I met her because of our mutual interest in space. So life has its ways, Nathan, and I'm not trying to force anything anymore.
Yeah, it's probably best. It's like trying to make friends. The person that's like, oh, I gotta have friends, gotta have friends, gotta have friends, probably has the most struggles of actually making friends.
Yeah, yeah, true. Yeah. No, but it's actually because of my interest in space. I went to a few space up events. I don't know if you know them.
Yeah, they're like sort of like these on in like space up like a space unconference type of
Yeah,
situation.
true. Yeah, yeah. Space unconferences they called. First one in Europe was in, I believe, I have to dig a bit now, 2015, I think, which was in Belgium actually, close to where I lived at that point. So that was perfect. And I went once to the one in Cologne in the the ESA Astronaut Training Center in Cologne. And there was a coffee break with a view on the training pool, where they train all the weightless exercises. And I said hello to a girl there, and well, we've been living together now for a few years. She moved from Barcelona all the way here, In 2 weeks, we're moving into our to the apartment that we bought together. Even so, see, space also brings these kind of little surprises sometimes in life, and I'm very happy that that this one was brought actually.
You kind of remind me of an idea that I've toyed with about having a dating site just for future
Ooh,
Mars colonists. You know,
yeah, oh, that would be nice actually. Yeah,
you know,
like
but
dating someone who's like as crazy as you. You mean?
yeah, it's willing to just pick up
Yeah,
everything and move to Mars, and it's like really developing the skills and sort of that mental toughness that you'll need to survive.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, but these I can actually recommend, even if you're not looking for dates or whatever. These space up events and all these social events, I can really recommend them actually because I met a lot of cool people there. Apart from my current partner, people who have like-minded interests, people who can tell you things about space that you or space exploration or engineering, things that you never heard of, that they can explain them to you. Actually, the space hub in Cologne, I booked an Airbnb, like very close to the venue. Turns out that the guy who rented out the Airbnb actually worked there,
Oh,
but he
wow.
didn't know of the event. And it was a Dutch guy working there in Cologne. And we got to talk. Oh yeah, and then he said, oh, before we go, so last minute, then he booked the ticket for the event as well because he wanted to go. We drove together, and he said, oh, before we go home, I'm gonna show you my office, and then they got mock-ups there from Mars landers and all that stuff, and I could touch everything and experiments that were about to get sent to the ISS that were being tested there, and like completely unexpected, and that was really, was a great experience. So I can only encourage people to do these things. The space community. There's a lot online, but I hope when COVID has died out a little bit that we can, join again and get to meet people and have these little unexpected moments again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, the whole COVID thing, I think people here where I live are kind of going through COVID fatigue, and
Uh-huh.
they've the same kind of thoughts you had about the highway, 6 kilometers where people have died. People here are starting to say about COVID. They're like, yeah, I might get it and die. I'm probably get it and get well, but life is going on, and I can't stay, holed up in my place forever.
It's a bit your the question that you asked, about going to Mars and the risks. Life is inherently full of risks, and I'm not saying to be. I mean, I had COVID earlier this year before vaccines were there, and I've been out for 7 weeks, so it was not a joke. It was not just a cold. And I would rather have not have had it, to be honest. But I understand that people are a bit, it's been 2 years now. I mean, we want to get our lives back, and I also want to go back to one of those space events, to be honest. Just geeking out about space with a bunch of people and doing your own small presentations or little space quizzes and that kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to that as well, actually. Yeah. So let's hope 2022 brings, yeah, a normal life again, let's say. And because in the last 2 years, I did enjoy everything that happened in space. We had James Webb, we had all the SpaceX things that happened. Really great, but yeah, those little social events, I miss them, to be honest. Yeah, I do.
And in 2018, I started a local chapter of the National Space Society. It's called the North Houston Space Society, and
Hmm.
we have monthly meetings. And whenever COVID happened, we went all online, which was, it had its plus and minuses because we were able to get guest speakers from outside the Houston area, and we had people participate. But now we're meeting again monthly, and I agree with you. It's so great to actually get to see people in person, have that little side talk.
Yeah, and those little sparks that you ignite with other people or other people that plant a seed in your head. A few months later, all of a sudden, an idea sprouts out of it. It's really hard to replace that with an online experience. first month of the pandemic, oh yes, webinars, I'm going to learn everything. And after a month, you're like, oh God, Zoom again. It's no. I hope we can return to that. Yeah, I really do.
So since you're following space, you must have learned early on about NASA's plans to send astronauts back to the moon.
Hmm.
Do you remember when you found out about it?
Honestly, no. But it wasn't really much of a surprise, was it? I mean, you, you knew they were working to it. I think. I mean, I at least I had the impression that that was going to be the goal. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, yeah, but in the 60s, the reason to go to the moon was mostly to beat the Russians, basically. And there was not much of a scientific. I think science came second. That's how I've always been taught. Aren't we having the same thing a bit again, but this time with China and the United States? Isn't that one of the drivers, you think?
I definitely think so. And China has just recently upped the stakes a little bit last week. I
Hmm.
mean, about I think a couple of months ago, NASA officially said, they're no longer targeting 2024, that 2025 would be like the earliest.
Hmm.
There's other groups that are saying that it might be closer to 2027, 2026, 2028. China has for many years been saying that they're planning to put people on the moon in the mid 30s. And last
Hmm.
week they said, now they're targeting 2027. So I think China sees
So they're like
maybe an
closing the gap.
opportunity
Yeah,
here to beat the Americans.
could be. And it's funny because that kind of, let's call it rivalry. Let's use a nice word for it. It's always been driving the whole space story. Even now, between Bezos and Musk and Branson, even that rivalry. All of a sudden we had Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin launching people into, well, if it's into space or not. Let's keep that discussion aside as well. But competition is a good thing. It's competition that drives innovation. It's competition that makes companies explore new business models, new technologies. Which is, by the way, actually for me the most interesting thing about this new moon race. I work in innovation. It's for a retail company, so it's not space related, but we do use a lot, or we are at least working now with a lot of technology that 20 years ago would have been unthinkable. Self-driving robots, artificial intelligence, all these things. And what I'm really curious about, to be honest, is what in the next 10 years will be the side products of this new race to the moon. In the 60s, we all know the stories of the diapers and all these things that came out of that first space race. Now I'm looking forward to what kind of advancements in artificial intelligence, for example, will be made. What kind of sensors will be developed for self-driving rovers on the moon? Because it's I think it's already obvious that it's not all going to be uh, controlled by people, right? Even a regular launch now, people don't do anything anymore. Everything is controlled, everything is automated. So that's what I'm really curious about. When that Ingenuity flew on Mars, that was all. You cannot control it with a joystick with a 20-minute delay, right? And even the moon, I think back and forth, that's like what, 4 seconds, I think, delay, something like that, right?
I think a couple of
Uh,
seconds, not too
yeah,
long, but long
yeah,
enough
but too
to
long.
make
But
it
yeah, right. Too long to
irritating.
put someone here, behind a joystick. So I'm really curious when in that field of like self-driving vehicles and those things, what will happen in the next 10 years? It's going to be exciting, I think. And the first one to if there's a competition now between the US and China, it's going to be the first one who has the software there, basically, and the hardware as well. It's still a thing, but I think software has become more important than in the 60s. The first one to have the software will win the race. And that's really exciting to see, because we are all in our daily lives, we're going to get all the byproducts gonna have that completely again, just like in the 60s and 70s. So it's gonna be exciting. Yeah.
It's funny you say how software is more important now than maybe it was then. I I've been reading up a little bit on the Apollo program, and like whenever they had the contract for the guidance computer, the
Hmm.
contract, goes on and on about the hardware, but like the software is not even mentioned. It's just like the idea that you need software wasn't even a concept back then. People were so hardware centric.
Well, you have those pictures of those piles of paper with all the code that they wrote, Um, but I think outside of NASA, no one was writing code back in that day, so to
Hmm.
speak. While today, anyone who has followed a good Python course, so to speak, could write software. That's a bit exaggerated, of course, but I think now now that software is more important, the race in that field is completely open. And if you see how the Chinese are handling innovation in general, they're fast. They're they usually have how should I say it? They usually have that gold really well in mind. So I wouldn't be surprised if they actually would land earlier than the Americans. Like, I'm not rooting for anyone here, just for the record, but it wouldn't surprise me if they beat it just based on that, actually.
Um, I guess, do you think that matters? I mean, like uh, that it matters who gets back to the moon first, that there would be some type of consequence.
Well, I guess it does. Yeah. In my let's call it in my previous life, I studied political science. I didn't finish it. I studied it. um, but no, I think it doesn't matter. I think there's just like in the 60s, there's something going on between a few power blocks in the world that are trying to shift balance. You know, since World War II, America had it was American and Russians, then Soviet Union imploded end of the 80s. Then America was there as the only superpower, basically, yeah, in the 90s of last century. And then China came, India's coming as well, Russia's trying to come a bit back. Europe is like floating a bit in between there. But I do think that the Chinese are, it's just a thought. It's not like I'm really into the topic, but I do think that they're trying to show that they are actually leading. And I do think that just like the Americans just threw money at the Apollo program, just make it work, whatever the cost. I have a feeling that the same thing is going a bit in China. Yeah. And it's going to be interesting even far beyond the whole space story, what's happening there in the next 20, 30 years, because I think there's going to be a big shift happening. Yeah, really.
Uh, I think, there's basically three levels of risk I see to China. And I'd like to get your thoughts on these. I mean, the first one that you talked about was, um, they're trying to show that they're a superpower, that they can do it, that whatever the Americans can do,
Hmm.
they can do. And, I think everybody's like, okay, that's fine. Not really. I mean, where's the real risk in that? It's just all
Hmm.
prestige and everything. But like the next level above that is, you know, these resources on the moon belong to us. You can't access them. And in fact, then, that could even be construed to the entire moon belongs to us type of thing. And I think people are really kind of interested in seeing how that happens. I mean, can if China lands first, are the Americans able to land also, and it's they're able to kind of accommodate each other. So
Yeah.
that's sort of like that second level of risk. And I was wondering what your take is on that.
Well, I have the impression that the last few years we've seen a few power moves when it comes to the weaponization of space. I think we've seen a few tests from, I believe, the Russians and the Indians, I believe, to blow up their own satellites. That was a common courtesy, if you want to show, if you want to do a demo, at least blow up your own stuff. But the fact that that's happening kind of worries me that there might be something going on there. I don't think that future wars are going to be fought with boots on the ground. No one's going to send millions of soldiers to another country anymore. I think that's a thing of the past. Is it going to be in space? What if whoever it would be, would blow GPS satellites or Galileo satellites out of the air, of the sky. There are treaties, that say that you don't do that. The moon doesn't belong to anyone. All these things are nice, but in the end, it's just a piece of paper with a signature. And usually the person who signed it back then is not there anymore. So I'm not saying I'm scared, but I'm a bit worried about it, to be honest. And it's something that only 2 or maybe 3 superpowers can actually afford to do. The most of the countries will never have a space force, so to speak. There's going to be 3, maybe 4 countries in the world that can have it, and could be a repeat of what was the Cold War, but then in space. Who knows? I'm old enough to have known a bit like the end of the Cold War, but I'm not that old. But I've known the Soviet Union when I was a little kid. So I kind of remember it a little bit, and stories of nuclear bombs that were pointed at European capitals and that kind of stuff, which was scary as a kid, to be honest. So I wouldn't want to have the idea that there is nuclear bombs or whatever floating in space, orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes. So every 90 minutes they can drop one if they want. It's something that we should really work on as an international community to avoid that.
Well, and that goes right into like the third level of threat, right? The weaponization. Always seemed kind of crazy to me, people talking about the moon being a strategic military resource because, transporting missiles there and then launching them back towards Earth, it just seemed pointless, because it seems like it would take so long and be so costly. But I was watching one kind of commentator, analyst, talking about building sort of like a mass driver on the moon where your weapons wouldn't be rockets or anything intelligent. It would just be huge chunks of lunar rocks that you would shoot towards, you would literally shoot towards the Earth and drop on places, and it'd be relatively cheap. It would be non-nuclear, but would have the same devastating effects, and almost, kind of.
I think it's it sounds like a serious gamble to just throw a piece of moon to the Earth and then you guess that it's not landing on your own capital. I don't know about that, actually.
Well, you have to get the timing right?
Okay.
You have to get the timing right. But I mean, it's about understanding the time between launch and landing. You just wait until the part of the Earth gets into view that you need to kind of consider, and then by the time the Earth moves around, it's like there.
No, but I think it's 2 things indeed. It's first of all, basically, like erase what Bezos and Musk are doing. It's actually the same thing, but then on a geopolitical scale between the United States and China or so. It's about showing off. It's about trying to be the best. It's about impressing. It's about showing who's strongest. But on the other hand, the weaponization is a thing. We've seen it in the past. And, as soon as people invent chips, they use it to, destroy other people's ships, basically, or to go to faraway lands and destroy things there or steal things there. I think it's a bit inherent to the to the human, what is it, human mindset, or what should I call it? So in that case, I'm actually a bit pessimist. I know it's not good to be pessimist, right? But in this one, I think it's a realistic. I'm not sure about blowing the moon towards Earth. I'm not sure about that specifically, but I can very well imagine that, like The Expanse, the show, The Expanse, that people are actually just. That's what I like about The Expanse, by the way. It's science fiction. People are in places where which are now unreachable. But once when we're there, we're just doing human things. We're just knocking each other's head in because you're wearing a different color or you're from a different faction or whatever. Uh, we're still trying to, politicians are still corrupt. Everyone is still power hungry. It's what I like about the Expanse. It's how humans are, and Star Trek was always about once when we explore space, we become a better species. The Expanse just says, it's going to be the same crap, just in a different location. So I'm afraid the second thing will happen, but I'm still rooting for the first.
Well, I I don't know how life is for you, but life for me seems really comfortable compared to what I think like my ancestors had to go through. Like,
Yeah,
100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago. I I think they would actually have a far easier time adapting my world than I would to theirs,
of
just
course. Yeah,
because
yeah,
of the mental and physical kind of grit that you would need to have.
yeah,
And while it may not bring out the best in us, I think going to Mars is definitely going to bring out the strongest in us in terms of that ability to survive in a really difficult situation.
like you say, if I would have born 100 years early, I probably wouldn't be here now because when I was 4 or 5, kind of like pneumonia. 100 years ago they wouldn't have done anything for me. Probably just would have been one of the kids. What was it? 1 out of 6 kids or something that didn't make it until the age of 10. Uh, so things have improved. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm not one of those people who says that everything used to be better. My grandma always said it's not. My grandma, she's 96 now, and she says, it wasn't better back in the day. Some things were, but a lot of things weren't. I don't want to be overly pessimist here, Nathan, but as you say, going to Mars, yeah, it should bring out the strongest in us. What I would like to see is basically, if we would go to Mars or even to the moon, actually, to have a joint international mission, something like the ISS. As much as the Americans and Russians had their tensions in the last 20 years, it all worked up there because you don't really have a choice. You can close the hedge of your module and the other ones can do the same. But in the end, there's always a lever or a switch that you have to pull in that in that other part, so to speak. So it would be nice if it could actually be done in a more international context. But then the question is, who's financing it, and then politics come into play. But if we could do it internationally, sure, it would have my total support, definitely.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting about the ISS. A couple of strange things there, in terms of holes in a Soyuz capsule that there's some
Yeah.
controversy about. The couple of new Russian modules that have disoriented the,
Uh-huh.
caused some issues, and Russia wanting to maybe collaborate more with China instead of the
Hmm.
US. And then you have the whole Ukraine thing. Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see
Hmm.
what comes out there.
Yeah, that was really a weird story, wasn't it? Like, there's a hole in the ISS. I mean, like
Yeah.
how, and then someone has to put their finger on it, like and then yeah, I don't know, but didn't they? What was it eventually? Wasn't it done on the ground? Didn't they discover that eventually that it was some of the ground crew who did it, or?
The leading most plausible theory that I heard was that somebody on the ground, as part of manufacturing, had drilled a hole in the wrong spot and used putty to cover it up. That's,
Oh
you know,
God.
right? Um, but
Yeah.
there's also another story that has gotten some press. Apparently, this theory advanced by Russians that there was an American astronaut who wanted to get back early, and so decided
Yeah.
to take a drill to the Soyuz capsule.
Okay. Just to create an emergency and evacuate, or
Hmm.
would that? Yeah. Yeah, it's a crazy story, and again, it's something that I also mentioned in the beginning. It's people up there, and even if they're well selected and well trained, it's still people with a mind. They're not machines, they're not robots, they're people with minds. There's chemistry in that brain happening. And let's say if that story would be true, about the person who wanted to leave, those are the unpredictable factors that you will have when you go to the moon. If you go to Mars, you're like half a year on the way or something, one way. Can you imagine being stuck with, you know, imagine the last time you were on an airplane. Can you imagine that lasting for 6 months? you know, like 6 hours is like, okay, time to land and time to get out. It must be incredibly challenging actually. If they would ask me like, let's say if I would be medically fit, let's assume, and they say, hey, you can go to Mars. I would, yeah, it's of course, yes, but being stuck there for 6 months with people in a confined space and I think it must be mentally challenging. So I can imagine people drilling holes, you know. So yeah, it's a common theme. If you look like space movies, sci-fi movies, there's always someone going crazy in those movies, and sabotaging everything. I don't think it's that weird actually, no. But you can have that selection as thorough as they do now, but in the end, it's people, it's chemistry in the brain, it's there's an unpredictable factor. Software, you can test it and you can be 99.999% sure that it's bug free. People aren't. And it shouldn't be, I mean, they're people.
Yeah, I wish I had that high confidence about software as you do.
Well, I say you could test
You
it. I'm not
could.
saying that at all. Yeah, you could. Yeah? Of course, yeah. There is more. What is it? There is more software in your smartphone now than in the Apollo 11. That's what they always say, at least. Or no, what was it? Or the processor in your smartphone is stronger than the one from Apollo 11. So I guess the more.
I think it actually may be more than that. I think the processing power of your smartphone actually contains more processing power than existed on Earth during the
Well,
time that
yeah,
you
it
went to
could
the
be.
moon.
And no one had computers back then. Everything, was. I mean, nothing was automated, sort of speaking. But that's the thing. You see that when you increase the amount of software, uh, the risk of bugs increases. What is it, exponentially in the end, and so on. So yeah, I think 99.9999%. Maybe have a software engineer when you fly to Mars. It couldn't hurt. So we can bug fix things or something. Yeah.
You need to. Yeah, you have no idea what you're going to run into on the way.
Yeah, but that's actually a good question. If you would do this kind of missions, in the Apollo days, it were basically Air Force pilots. Basically, what kind of crew would you need now to go to Mars? I guess you need one or two pilots, but don't you need more software engineers? Don't you need more wouldn't you need a psychologist maybe on
A
board?
machinist, a chemist, these
Yeah.
types of skills too. Somebody that can actually, kind of adapt to whatever situation you might find yourself into.
Yeah, and in that sense, I think is a totally different story than what happened in the 60s. It was almost like a military operation landing on the
Hmm.
moon. It was almost like flying an experimental aircraft and landing on a carrier that hadn't been tested yet, something like that. Well, now I think it's more of more scientific, more engineering, more software. Yeah, it changes the whole how you say the whole composition of your crew, I guess.
In fact, you may want the people that are going to Mars to actually build the ship. And that way
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
they actually know what they have, they know how it works, they know what can be changed.
Yeah. Or like in Armageddon, Steve Buscemi's character, I forgot the name of the character. He says, "What is it? 20 million parts assembled by the lowest bidder, or
Yes.
something." But then make the CEO ride on the plane as well, or on the shuttle as well, and then you'll see that it will be completely safe then. It's
Well,
actually not a
actually,
bad idea. Have the people who build it, let them go, let them fly it. They know it creates kind of, you see, like a more of a cooperative project maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, could be good work.
But yeah, that's a good idea about the CEO because my wife really uh, liked the fact that Jeff Bezos went on Blue Origin's flight and Richard Branson went on Virgin Galactic's flight. It's like, okay, now
Yeah.
I feel like I can go. If he's going, I can go.
Yeah, that's the thing. Right before that launch, actually, from Virgin Galactic, I bought some stocks because I was like, oh, Richard is going, so this is safe. Um, it went well. The stock didn't go so well afterwards. That's a pity. But I think it was a strong signal actually that the CEO, I mean, Branson saying like, I'm flying this thing, or with this thing. Um, it sends a huge, really strong signal of confidence. We know what we're doing here. We really believe in this. Um, I think that you put something at stake when you do that. And so I'm a bit surprised actually that Elon Musk hasn't gone up with the Dragon yet. Not sure why actually.
Yeah, I think he's just laser focused on Mars. He's like everything else is a distraction.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Could be strong signal, yeah. But there's something there, when you say like when you send people over and if they build part of the ship, once when they land, the ship needs to be converted to a habitat probably.
Hmm.
If those people know it inside out, it's yeah, that could actually be a great advantage. Yeah.
I like to say the poorest person in the world is the rich man that doesn't know what he has. Um, and so, the same thing's true with these Mars travelers, I mean, if you build the ship, you might actually have an idea on what's actually in the ship and can
Hmm.
adapt better to the situation. Whereas if you're just like a crew, you may not have as deep understanding.
No, because I've done a few of those bushcrafting survival courses, in the course of the years, just out of interest. But landing on Mars with that ship, I mean, that's like the ultimate bushcrafting survival, right? You got that ship and that's it. There is no breathable atmosphere. The pressure is different, gravity is different. There's no food, as far as we know. No water accessible. It's that's incredibly challenging. So you need these kind of Bear Grylls types, so to speak, to be on that crew because when things go wrong, there's no one's there to help you. And the Martian pops up, of course, the movie, like trying to get find manure and find this and that. I think you're gonna need people who are really, really strong and have strong minds and strong survival skills on those kind of missions. Maybe even more than with Apollo, because with Apollo, you think you were more dependent on the people on Earth. I think when you
Yeah.
fly to Mars, they cannot do anything. There is nothing. You can't even turn back halfway, right? When you're going, you have to go to Mars, and that's it. So I think you need mentally immensely strong people for that. I cannot imagine. Honestly, I can't imagine doing it. Actually, to be honest. No, a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, I can do it." I'm not sure if I could. No.
Yeah, I think people who lived 200, 300 years ago would be better likely able to do it than we could. These people that went on like 6-month voyages to like Antarctica as an
Oh
example.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's, for example, where the town where I grew up. It didn't grow up in Antwerp. There was my high school, and right next to it was the house where Adrien de Gerlache lived. And he's not so famous by name, but he was the first person to spend the winter on the North Pole.
Ah,
And that's quite that was something, what was it, 1800s, I think, something. So what you had a ship, you had some supplies. So they just went there, they let the ship freeze in, did science, and then returned home. I mean, like, what kind of people can you find for that mission to begin with, you're walking around in the port, you're asking like, hey, looking for some sailors who want to spend 6 months, our Arctic winter. Um, but they did. Okay, probably not all of them made it home, I guess. He did. He did at least. But these people, I mean, that's a special kind of people, I think. Those are not regular people. to put it like that. And you're gonna need those types if you want to go to Mars. I think for the moon as well, of course. But the moon is still different. It's kind of like in reach, so to speak. Mars is gonna be. I'm wondering how it feels, Nathan, to be there. What if you land on Mars and then you realize that you're, in the best case, a year away from Earth? How would that feel? What does it do
Yeah,
with people?
and also knowing that you're always going to have to be in a artificial environment, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that too. It's a question me once. There was one of those space up events. Don't remember which one it was, but there was a bit of an open debate moment. And one of the questions was if there would be colonies on Mars, and you would have kids. Is it ethical to have kids growing up in a place where they will never see a tree, for example? Is that an ethical thing to do?
Um,
People, because they will always be in a suit or in a controlled environment. One of the, assuming that we haven't done any, what is it, geoengineering or whatever it's called, would that be ethical to do? And how long would you last in a habitat or a suit?
yeah, it's difficult. It's hard wearing the same pair of clothes for too long.
Yeah,
But I mean, like the spacesuit, people like the spacesuit is seen as being, I mean, that thing's gonna get dirty, right? I mean, like every
yeah,
breath you take, every
yeah,
step you take,
yeah, yeah,
it's like it's getting dirtier and dirtier.
yeah. But there's a whole ethical aspect to it, I think. And if you have people who volunteer and if they know what they're doing, fine. But what in the long run if you would, effectively start having kids in these places? It's probably we're not talking about the 30s, obviously, but far future. It's what you see, for example, in The Expanse, huh? That people who grow up in these mining colonies on these dwarf planets, when they arrive on Earth, their bones can't support their own weight and that kind of stuff because they've never been used to that much gravity. Um, you really start to tinker with the essence of a person. I think millions of years of evolution have brought us to who we are now as a human. Your human form. It took millions of years, and in 100 years we're going to try to change it. I don't think that works.
I think that's a really slippery area, because really what you're saying is, you know, is it ethical to bring a child into a certain situation that may be less ideal for that child? And, you know, you can almost extend that to if you knew the child had birth defects before they were born, is it ethical to still continue on with it or to abort it? It's like, and children, um, I don't think they're ever born into the ideal situation. I mean, so it's like,
Mm.
no.
Yeah, no, but the thing is, if let's say that if a child will be born on Mars or the moon, whatever, it's born in a place where that human form was not evolved for. You know, it's evolved to be here on Earth with this gravity, with the composition of the air that we know, with nature that surrounds you, all these things. There is a sort of a balance between you and your surroundings, right? And
Mm.
millions of years of evolution has created that. And in the last 200 years, we maybe changed it a bit too much, but there's still somewhere a balance. If you tell that kid as soon as it's born and you want to take a stroll, so to speak, with your baby outside the habitat, you have to wrap it in a spacesuit. That child will never touch a tree. It will never breathe fresh air. It will never maybe never eat a fresh tomato or something. Never pet a dog. Never see a fish swimming. Is that ethical? There was a question that arose there at that space, so it was a nice discussion actually. There were a lot of very different views from the crowd there.
Well, I'm hoping that if you did have a child on Mars, they would be able to pet a dog, have a fish, because we can't just go by ourselves. Like you said, we live inside of an ecosystem, and to some, we're able to create artificial cavities in that ecosystem that we live. But I think we really have to bring the entire ecosystem with us. Like,
Yeah, like the what was it, biosphere back in the day? Was it in Nevada, I think, somewhere in the
Arizona.
deserts, or Arizona? Yeah, I remember that because there was a Belgian in there, so it was in the news from time to time. But it didn't really work, did it? Back in the day, they had some issues. The what was it, the bees? There was a swarm of bees that they had, to pollinate. But the bees apparently didn't see they didn't notice that there was a glass barrier around that biosphere, so they all basically smashed themselves to death. There were other things going wrong. I'm not sure if it's so easy. I think it's incredibly difficult. We try to mimic nature so much. Also in robotics, for example, if we do robotics for a warehouse, you sometimes, in some way, you're still mimicking human motion. There's a thing moving, there's two arms picking something up, there's bugs being moved with two claws or whatever. We're always trying to mimic nature. But I think there's limits to that if you really want to bring it to a whole biosphere on another planet. And I'm not saying it's not possible. It probably is. But I think the first people who are going to try it, they're in for a rough ride. They definitely are. So what Elon Musk says is we need number of, what is it, a few dozen or a few hundreds, whatever it is, spaceships to have a constant supply, because you cannot expect that first capsule or that first rocket that lands to have everything. But it's probably possible. It's probably possible. It will take years, I think, to build.
Well, let's assume that we did have children on Mars. And let's assume that your great granddaughter is on
Mm-hmm.
Mars, lives on
Mm-hmm.
Mars, like second, third generation Martian. And she's going through high school. Of course, she's half the age as most high schoolers because of the, takes
Oh
twice
yeah,
as
yeah,
long to
yeah.
go around the.
Okay. Yeah. Less birthdays. God, how can you do that to a child? Come on.
Well, people start having the 1.5 birthday and the 2.5 birthday, right?
Okay, okay. You're working with decimals.
Yeah, you
Okay.
started having the 0.5 birthday. But anyway, so she has this high school paper. It's go and talk about what people were thinking before we took those next steps on the moon that ultimately led to the expansion of humanity beyond the Earth. And she finds this video, and she's looking at you, and you had the opportunity to help give her that little insight that gets her an A on her paper. I was wondering what it might
Okay.
be.
Oh, that's hard. I think the answer is a bit cliche probably, but it's the human tendency to conquer and to explore. Um, you know, um, as soon as we discovered that wood floats on water and that you can put a few wooden planks together and it doesn't leak, we built boats and we went to explore islands. We went to explore new worlds. It's even long before civilization as we know it. All these people that in the Pacific spread out over all these islands. They did it with very primitive boats. They navigated at night, basing themselves on stars and everything. With those very simple means that they had, they already managed to conquer the whole Pacific Ocean. It's because there is an urge. People just want to explore. They want to conquer. They sometimes they do it with violence. Sometimes they do it without. And that's what's bringing us to Mars now. And if people there, they will have that tendency to survive, it will also be because they want to survive, they want to conquer, they want to explore. So if my great granddaughter would be there, and she would see this video, she would probably think like, "Oh God, that guy is so, you know, that guy that had no idea what was coming." That's her first conclusion, probably. Um, but to give her that extra push, it's about the will to explore. I think that's it, and that drives us in everything we do. Also in technology, if innovation, what is innovation? We're just trying to explore new and better ways to do things that we already do, or to do things that we cannot do yet. It's the same thing.
That's great. Yeah, I think she'll get an A.
Okay, okay, it's good. It's better than I did in school.
Um, would you consider immigrating to Mars?
I've got a daughter here, can't leave her behind. So I'd say no.
Well, what if she was willing to go with you?
Mm, yeah, then maybe. Yeah, then maybe. I know most people in the space community, they're like, yes, they're first in line to go. Um, I I would like to be part of those people, that explore, of course. On the other hand, I might sometimes, maybe it's the age, sometimes I'm taking less and less risk in life. So I don't know actually. It's um, it's exciting. I think it would be great to be one of the people that are mentioned in the history books, so to speak. Like the first people who went. On the other hand, if I can be cynical, name five people who were with Columbus on his ships. You know, how many can you name except for
Zero.
him?
Yeah,
Zero. So
zero.
they say fortune favors the bold, but fortune also favors the people who write history afterwards. Huh? So that's kind of a side note, maybe. Um, I think now it would be too early anyway. With the technology that we have now, I think your chances of if they leave tomorrow, I think your chances of survival are quite slim, I guess. Let's first go to the moon again. Let's try to do it in this decade. Whoever it may be who lands first, let's put people there. Let's see it from that perspective. People on the moon. I think it will be a great way. When we do innovation, we build a prototype first, and then a proof of concept, and then you go to industrialization, right? I think it's the same steps we have to do here. We can go back to the moon. We kind of did a prototype already in the 60s. So let's do the proof of concept now. Let's see if it's viable. Let's see if you can keep humans there for a week or longer. Let's see if you can build a habitat. And let's use that knowledge to actually, you know, take the next step, which will probably be going to Mars. Um, Innovation is sometimes very disruptive, but in the end, it is incremental. I think it's going to be the same story here.
Yeah, definitely. And plus whenever you look at what it takes just to maintain the ISS, I mean, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but I'm actually having a career change. Next month, I'm going to be training to be a flight controller at NASA to,
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
to monitor the station power and thermal control systems for the
Oh,
International Space
wow.
Station.
Hmm.
But when I look at all the systems we had to build just to maintain those 6 humans being up there, it's really hard to imagine. I mean, there's like no way we colonize the universe with the same
No,
pattern that we currently have.
no. We're going to need a whole different, how should I say it? The environment that if you're in space and you want an environment that's suitable for humans, we still make it too complicated, I think. We need to find a way to make it more simple than we do now. Yeah, I don't know how many components are in the ISS, probably millions, I guess.
Mm.
Just putting a number here. Um, that means, I mean, how many, maybe how many of those are there at the ISS? Thousands?
Yeah, I mean, could you ask the question again? The connection kind of broke up.
Yeah. So you have millions of components in the ISS, right? So you probably have a few thousand point of failures,
Oh,
I
right.
guess. You cannot,
Absolutely.
if you go with that, with that kind of setup deeper into space, one of those points of failures will eventually happen. Uh, so I think we need to simplify it somehow. We actually need to tone it down instead of scale it up. Sometimes things just work better when they're simple. It's what I'm gonna fall into a cliche again, but the iPhone, the first iPhone,
Hmm.
it could do so much more, but in the end it was simpler to use, right? And that's something I guess that we also need to do. And again, I think going to the moon in the next decade, it will teach us a whole lot about what it's actually gonna be on Mars because different challenges, Moon and Mars. It's different environments, but in the end, you're on your own when you're there. You gotta have that survival thing going, and if you have 1,000 point of failure, sooner or later you'll be you'll be
Yeah,
screwed, I guess. You can
absolutely.
have all the engineers in the world, but you cannot take all the spare parts with you to begin with. There's only a limit of things you can do. So that's something, yeah. That it's the same like when you build automation, for example, in warehouses. The more moving parts, the more failures you have. It's the same principle.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to make it simple. Um, yeah, no, that's for sure. I mean, like the simpler the system, the easier it is to understand, the easier it is to repair, the easier it is to um, do everything.
And also, simpler systems have a tendency to be more adaptable. The more complicated that something becomes, the harder it is to adapt it to the environment or to changing circumstances. And I cannot imagine if you land on Mars with your habitat that that all these fancy engineers built. And then turns out that it actually, it needs some tweaking, but which of the 300,000 parts do you need to tweak, and which of the 5 million lines of codes do you need to, or which of the millions of parameters do you need to change? The simpler the better in that case.
Yeah, the clearer and everything. Well, I know we covered a lot of ground, but is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Well, actually, I just I just called in with an open mind. I just thought, let the conversation flow. That's what I like. No, no, the excuse me. This is what I said. One of the things that I'm most curious about is what side effect, what kind of technology will we see in the next decade or the next 20 years coming back to Earth, um, of whole that whole new space race that's going on. I'm really curious about it. I think we're gonna be pleasantly surprised, I think, about that. But honestly, I cannot put my finger on it yet. So I'm really curious about it. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Well, I'm hoping I'm hoping within the next few years we see people on the moon and see people go to
Definitely.
Mars, the Starship is successful, and that like the 2020s are like just as transformational to space as the 1990s were to the internet.
But I hope we actually get there because, the one little danger, if I may call it like that, is expectations are high now. So if we can make it happen, will people still believe in, you know, putting people on the moon and on Mars? We've been
Mhm.
saying it for 20 years now, I think. You had that Mars One project. They were going to make a reality show with people landing on Mars. Thing went bust after a year, I think, already. Um, there have been a few people who were promising to do it, a few organizations. So yeah, I don't know the English expression for it, but you got to put your money where your mouth is. I guess that's the expression. They need to do that this decade, I think, because it was like, yeah, we're going to put people on Mars in the 20s, and then it was like, yeah, okay, the moon in the 20s. What if that doesn't work? At a certain point, people are going to say, well, stop throwing money at this because it's not happening. That's a risk you take. So, let's say they have 8 years to make it happen, I guess. Um, and you're going to be part of that somehow. Well, maybe not
I hope to.
directly, but at least indirectly for now.
I mean, my goal is to try to figure out some way to become part of Artemis and be in the mission control room on the day that we have the next people step on the moon. That's sort of my dream.
Yeah, and give a green light for launch.
Yes,
How awesome would that be, right?
I know. Go. Yeah.
That's yeah, that's something. Yeah, like, I can imagine that this must be a thrill, for the people there that will do that first launch with actual people again to the moon. It must be a real thrill. Yeah. So if you're there, I hope you can invite me then, because I'll stay in the back somewhere. I won't touch anything. If I can just be there, it would be nice.
Let's see what we can do.
Okay, okay. I have your email address, right? So I'll know where to
Absolutely.
find you then. I'll know where to find
Absolutely.
you. Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you. I hope you have a good rest of your
Yeah.
evening. And
Yeah. Yeah. I will. Thank
let's
you.
keep in touch. And I'll look for one of those Space Up conferences around here. It sounds like really fun.
Yeah, sure. It's what is it? Spaceup.org, I think, the website. So, and if there's none, Nathan, you can just organize one yourself. It's not that hard, actually.
I'll have to do that.
Right. And it's we did it once. It's not that much work, to be honest, and you get a lot of it, back from the people who come. So I definitely say, if you got access to these cool locations there in Houston, go for it.
Well, it sounds good. Okay, well, I'll talk to you later then.
All right. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.